Jason Wang. I'm the CEO of Xi'an Famous Foods here in New York City. We serve specialty Chinese food from my hometown of Xi'an, China, in the Shanxi province. Today I'm here in the test kitchen showing you one of our signature dishes, our biang biang hand rib noodles with pork Zha Jiang meat sauce. The pork Zha Jiang sauce is actually a sauce from northern China, northern East Asia, Korea, Beijing. There's many different areas serving this dish along the region, but it's very personal to me because I used to eat it pretty often as a kid. And of course, our biang biang noodles are very distinct to our Shanxi province region, and it's something that Xi'an Famous Foods serve in our stores all the time. So putting those two together, it's gonna be a really delicious and really significant dish for us today. So here we have a bowl of the all-purpose flour. First, we're gonna add the salt into the flour. It just helps the texture of noodles and also a little bit of the flavor. We're gonna start just imitating a machine mixer with our fingers. Slowly add the water, no need to rush this. You start seeing the dough grouping together the more, it's coming off the sides of the bowl. It's no longer just the powder. Sometimes you just gotta kind of hold the bowl and kind of go into it. When you're making the dough for use in the restaurants, you really can't do this because as you can see, it does take some time. But with the help of machines, mixer machines, really large ones, it comes out actually more consistently than handmade. The goal is to have a clean bowl with no flour and no mass stuck on the sides, no slush, nothing like that. The glass is pretty much free of flour now. It doesn't need to be perfectly smooth. You still see some crevices here and some uneven parts. I'm gonna put it back into the bowl to rest, but I'm gonna cover with plastic wrap so it's not gonna dry up and get all crusty. And we're gonna let this rest for about 20 minutes and then it'll be ready to be cut into pieces for the noodles. The dough has gone through some trials and tribulations. It's basically rested kneaded, 2 sets, and then rested for 20 times each at room temperature. And as you can see, after resting, it's actually really smooth now. It's bouncier. It should still have a bit of toughness to it. It's not supposed to be like super squishy like marshmallow. So we're gonna cut these first. You just want the dough to be about 100 grams each, give or take. And now what we're gonna do is just, for each piece, we're just gonna roll it out into like a flatter rectangular shape. So once you get these pieces, some vegetable oil right here, we just rub it on. And the only reason we do this is just so that it retains the moisture and the smoothness of the dough until we're ready to use it for pulling noodles. And for these pieces, because you've already oiled them, you can lay them sort of on top of each other. Just a few more pieces and we're pretty much prepped. Let it sit for maybe half a day or so in the fridge. It's sort of a resting process because just now, we messed with the dough a little bit, so it's tightened up a little bit. We need a little time for it to ease off, not be so tense, and then it'll be perfect for pulling. So we're gonna leave it a few hours at least, and then we're gonna come back to it and we're gonna be ready to use them to make our noodles. Before we get started on the pork Zha Jiang sauce, we gotta prepare our vegetables and aromatics, so that is ready to go. So we have the pork. Now we're going to prepare the vegetables that we need for this dish. Particularly for cooking the pork, we're gonna need some scallions or green onions. And we're just gonna slice them into smaller, about 1/4 of an inch pieces. Next, we're gonna cut a small piece of ginger. We also have some essential sauces and liquids that we need for this dish. Now, this is a sweet flour paste. It's used as the main flavoring of this meat sauce. Next ingredient is our Shaoxing cooking wine. It doesn't need to be super accurate because the thing about cooking wine is it just evaporates when you're cooking. We're just gonna mix this up into a thick sauce. And this is the last component of the pork Zha Jiang meat sauce. So here we have the green cabbage, which is cooked with the noodles in the same pot, just to give the noodle dish a little bit of textural variation because the noodles are chewy, the cabbage is gonna be a little crunchy, so that adds that texture. So we wanna cut these into 1.5 inch pieces. Lastly, we have a crunchy cucumber, cut them into slivers. We're gonna set that aside. We've meased out all of our ingredients. Now we're ready to go to the stove. All right, so we're at the stove. We have our pan, which is decent size enough pan in order to fit all of our ingredients as well as the meat. Just gonna let the pan get heated a little bit before we put the oil in. And when we're using oil, we're just using regular vegetable oil, canola oil, oils of that sort. We're going to put the pork in first, and immediately we just wanna make sure to break up the meat. This part comes together pretty quickly. It should be done at a high temperature, so you have some of the caramelization, but you don't wanna burn the meat either. Right about there, it would be a good amount. So I'm gonna turn it off. So I'm gonna use a solid spoon, so we're not taking too much of the juice, too much of the oil out. The fat's basically done a lot of its job in cooking the meat at this point, so we don't need too much of it. We're starting with a clean pan, so we're gonna wait for the oil to heat up again before we put in the aromatics. So the oil is hot at this point. Gonna put in the ginger, stir around a little bit. We'll put in the scallions. Really just sweat it a little bit, get the flavor out. Try not to burn it. The scallions should turn greener and a little bit wilted, but not brown or black or burnt. Same with the ginger. I'm going to add my pork back in. Make sure you stir around so no meat is stuck on the sides. The meat's already cooked, so you don't need to cook it too long. It's really just about meshing the ingredients. And now we're going to take the reserve sauce, which is the cooking wine and the sweet flour paste or sweet soybean paste, and we're gonna add it in. So see how it's a really thick consistency? And that's really, again, adding to the body of the sauce. It's actually becoming more of a sauce rather than a stir fry. And we're gonna turn the fire to medium so it doesn't burn the sauce. So there's a lot of sugar in the sauce and it's already very thick, so we really don't want to reduce it too quickly or burn the sugar, but we do want the flavor to get deeper into the meat. And we're gonna add a little bit of more sweetness to it with a little bit of just white sugar. The sweetness helps balance out the saltiness of the sauce. All right, so the sauce is done. I'm gonna just let it sit with the fire off just a little bit while I go over and make the hand-ribbed noodles. For these dough pieces, it takes 2 to make one of our regular sized servings. So I'm gonna take 2 pieces here and I'm gonna make sure to cover the rest so they don't get dry and crackly. Roll the pieces out so they're a little bit more even. Not roll it super thin, but just kind of spread it out into a little bit bigger of a rectangle. And then you're just gonna take the roller and you're going to make an indentation across the long way or the horizontal way of each piece. The purpose of that is to guide the shape of the noodles so that when you're pulling it, it'll keep along that line instead of going kind of off, and then you'll have thick ends and things like that. To do the next step, you gotta pick up the pieces. But when you pick it up, be careful not to pinch too hard, but also don't let go. Be careful not to linger too long holding the pieces. Otherwise, these things will make the ends very thick. You'll risk breaking off where you're holding them. So that's just a tip from me. I'm gonna pick the first piece up. I'm gonna hold it kind of like a book. First, stretch it apart, just past your shoulder. And then you're gonna start swing up and down, slap it on the counter while you're pulling it ever so slightly more apart. So that's what I mean by kind of lingering. As I'm talking, I linger a little too much and it'll break. But it's okay, even if it breaks, pick up the end and then keep going. That sound that you hear, the bang, bang, bang sound, that's why we call this bang, bang noodles. So once you get to a certain length, 4 feet at least, we're going to take the middle where the slight indentation is. Gonna rip it apart. You don't have to rip it all the way through, but just making sure that you rip enough that the ends are sort of even. The lines are sort of even in terms of thickness. So you're really doing a lot in your wrist, not so much like this. Just use the swing of the dough to pull it further and further apart. All right, so again, I'm just gonna take the middle, split it. So now the noodles are ready. I'm gonna go over and drop it into the pot. And we're just gonna drop it right into the hot boiling water. Right after we drop the noodles in, we should add in the cut cabbage. So just a handful, as much as you prefer. So it's been about 3 minutes. I'm gonna take the noodles and the cabbage out with the spider net. So the noodles are done. It's time to assemble the dish. We got some ingredients here. First, of course, we have our meat sauce, the most important, the one that we just cooked, Pork Zha Jiang sauce. And then I'm gonna put in some sliced scallions as well. The noodle sauce, which is primarily soy sauce and black vinegar. And then our chili crisps. I like spicy, so I added a lot of chili oil. Everything is in there. I'm going to just use tongs to mix it up. And you really should do this quickly after cooking noodles because the noodles are very fickle. They really should be enjoyed right away. So I add a little bit more of the pork and a little bit of the cucumber for garnish. This is Pork Zha Jiang Biang hand rib noodles. Oh my gosh. You know, I like it spicy, so the spice is definitely there, but the pork, the sweetness of it, the meat sauce, it's a gentle sweetness that works really well with the spice. So it's very well rounded. It's not a dish where it's just all about heat. It's why this dish is actually kind of a sleeper hit on our menu. Our noodles being very wide and chewy, it actually carries the sauce very well, and it's kind of like an envelope. It catches all the pieces of meat. The heat is not overwhelming because the sweetness of the sauce rounds it out, and it's just very approachable, very familiar tasting in a way, at least for me, because of that sweetness. That's my dish, Pork Zha Jiang Biang hand rib noodles. The process is very simple. So I really hope you get to enjoy some noodles at home. Remember, the best ways to enjoy it, fresh from the pot, and don't let it sit too long, and have fun with it.